So bright. I should have turned that down. No. So I'm going to wait for my friends to come in to, I don't know, talk about some good news. Maybe it's good news. I'm not too sure here, people. I mean, it is good news to one degree or another. But at the same time, you know, there's all that, a big cloud, suspicions, insinuendos, scandalous activities hovering around. Right? What do they call them? Um, Energy vampires. Yeah, a lot of energy vampires. So before I get too involved, I'd like to be able to talk to maybe one or two of my friends, online friends, through this process. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to just wait for people to come in. Anyone that knows me, that is, or at least maybe they don't know me, quote unquote, but they watch my channel, right? So in the meantime, I'm working on my playlist. This is where you want the other computer working, but I'm frying out my eyes big time. Big time. Mm-hmm. I thought I could do this multitask, you know? Yeah, but I don't know. I don't think so. If I had this computer running where I could see if anyone was watching, yeah, or saying something, then yeah, maybe okay. But other than that, what I want to say, I don't really want to just say it, but I don't even have one viewer right now. Somebody popped in and popped out, you know. So in some ways, I kind of want to just say it and be done with it. But then on other kind of ways, I feel like I should have to hide it. Yeah, because I don't trust the process in terms of what people's true intentions are and if they even have integrity, right? When it comes to finding out truth or accepting truth. That's a big one. Yeah, I can't multitask on this. I thought I could maybe just do what I got to do, but no, as I'm going through my videos from 2014, I'm actually taking the time to listen to probably 98% of them. Oh yeah. And then of course, I'm listing them into playlists that I think where they should go, right? Besides just in 2014 playlist, that is. And yeah, so I guess I can't do that. I should probably focus on this. Where are we? Right here. Yeah, still no viewers. So what is it? It's 1:30 in the afternoon. And I'm talking to myself again on YouTube. Okay. Where other people on YouTube just log in, go live, and within 10 minutes, they've got 400 people in their live. Yeah, go figure. And they do very little, if any, community activism of any sort. And if they do, it's only to make it look like they're charitable and to what degree, outside of maybe their circle of supporters, right? which I'm not saying aren't important because they are, but you know, community activism isn't just isolated down to, you know, a tiny little square. However, in the real world, that's what happens, right? If people like to support animals with, you know, those types of charities, right? Then they give to that charity, which is a very small little block on the block of many charities, right? So why would YouTube be any different? It probably wouldn't. But I'm not going to sit here and talk about my grandson with nobody watching. That's for sure. I mean, what's the difference between doing it from a camcord? Okay, here. We'll just go with the roll. What's the difference of talking to you know, to a camcord, right? With 0 views because it's not even online. I see one person came in. I hope this person is my friend, because if this person is my online friend, then we can actually discuss what's going on with Amari and the good news that I would like to think is good news. However, and this is where my online friend would come in handy, would confirm that, you know, as much as you want to take something for face value when somebody tells you that they want to help you to get to the root cause of something, but if they're going to skirt around issues that play a role in the final, it's not a decision, it's not an outcome, but the final written form of what happened, right? In terms of why does Amari have the type of cerebral palsy that he does? What happened? Nobody's answered that question yet. So, but when you look at the paperwork and you look at the paper trail and the few people that you've spoke to over time, because I've had Amari for, you know, almost 8 years now, right? And it's just a lot of cover up. How can you expect to go to a new person after all those years of insinuendos when you're walking in the hospital halls with your severely disabled grandson as they're whispering that it was the mother's fault, but yet they can't come with the proof that it was, just so they can cover their asses based on what my opinion is. I mean, already I'm getting upset just thinking about it. Because I want to believe in the process that there are good people out there with integrity that want the truth. And it's not just the truth for the family, for the child and the mother and the father and the aunts and the uncles and the cousins and the grandmas and the grandpas and so on and the caregivers or whoever. It's for the benefit, of the greater community, where what happened to my family, and in this particular case, it would be Amari and his mother, Shemay, doesn't happen to another woman and her child and her family, because a government is held to account for its I don't know what a lawyer would choose to say outside of, you know, I mean, negligence to one degree or another, but that's not strong enough to where it would provoke them to write new legislation to provide more funding so that when mothers go to hospitals to give birth, they're not sent away for 5 days in a row until the last minute, right? And then drag out freaking labor for another 12 hours so it can go into an emergency situation and then do the emergency C-section. So that's now what, the 6th day, right? Okay, the mother's been in labor. Like, come on, people. Because of what? There's not enough baby doctors because it's all being ran through a clinic. Like, come on. So, right? And then the baby comes out injured, but it takes you 8 months to figure it out. And even then you find out after the mother's dead, right? Because she got quote unquote, you know what, and nobody wants to acknowledge that except cover it up. But besides that point, that's what I mean. So I got somebody that wants to know what happened to Amari, whether it is genetic somehow. Not that I don't think cerebral palsy can be genetic. I don't. That's what was ruled out when he went for his first series of tests. Once it was determined that there was something wrong with him, and quite possibly it was cerebral palsy because of the symptoms that he was displaying when he was 9-10 months old. So they had to rule out the chromosome defects. And well, he didn't have Down syndrome, but chromonal, imbalances, or did he have sickle cell anemia cells, or what, genetic defects within just however that works, right? And they did that. They did all those series of tests, but everybody knew he had cerebral palsy, just right. They just knew, but they had to go through the protocol. Okay. That one person is still watching. So I appreciate it. Could be, you know what, though? It could be, you know who, right? I don't even want to mention that girl's name because she's just, God forbid if it's you, seriously, because you don't deserve this information. You really don't. No, you don't. But you know what? Sooner or later, what comes out, what's in the dark comes out into the light. And that's the point of this video, because if this doctor that I just came into contact with recently wants to know how Amari got what is it called, cerebral palsy, but it's not genetic. Tisha said, well, hereditary. I don't think you can inherit cerebral palsy, because cerebral palsy is direct lack of oxygen to the brain, whether in vitro or through the birthing process. Okay? I lean towards 5 days of being turned away from a hospital with labor pains, not getting adequate testing to see if everything was okay, outside of here's some morphine, go home and take it and come back when it gets worse. Okay? So by the 5th day, she went, but she'd already gone 2 times. And they kept her. And then they dragged it out for another 12 hours. Now, keep in mind, Amari had, what is that called? The umbilical cord around his neck. And I know for a fact that when you're in labor and your baby is coming down, it drops, because the baby drops in your tummy, right? And it's getting into your pelvic area to come down through the birth canal, okay? And your body is contracting. I know this for a fact because I gave birth to 5 kids, all right? 2 of them had their umbilical cords around their neck. Marcane in particular, all right? And so with Marcane, he was a big baby, 9 pounds, right? I'll just explain it to you this way. 9 pounds, got into labor. I think my doctor induced me to get the labor started because he was 2 weeks overdue. The only one that wasn't 2 weeks overdue was Shimei, and she came 1 week early on her own. I didn't need to be induced with her, but she was my 4th baby, okay, where Marcane was my 3rd. So anyway, the doctor induced me. I went to the hospital. He induced me. He got me ready, right? You know what I'm saying? He induced me. They monitored, my contractions. And, this is what I mean by that funding, okay? Where I got proper health care when it came to delivering a baby. So, and it was funny because he was a good doctor and he was a legitimate baby doctor. They don't even give these women any more baby doctors. They send them to clinics. Okay. They go to the clinic, they go to their medical clinic, they see their quote unquote maybe family doctor if they're lucky enough to have one. And then the family doctor refers them to a clinic that's a prenatal clinic where there's different doctors that work there, but you're not really assigned to one particular doctor like the good old days. And that's the problem when it comes to children at risk to perhaps not getting why was Shimei sent home 5 days for two times out of 5 days? Why? It's her first birth, right? They didn't do no amniotic fluid test on her to see if there was enough amniotic fluid for the baby. They didn't do no stress tests on the baby to see if the baby was under stress. They did nothing. I think they measured her cervix and then they just counted her contractions and it's, oh, well, here, you're not ready yet. Here, take the morphine and go home and take the morphine. If it gets worse, come back. Okay, that is not, that's medieval. I don't know how else to say it other than it's medieval. Where back in my day, and I'm 63, okay, whether you went in without being booked to be induced or whether you just went in labor and dealt with it that way, because I've done both, 5 live births, no C-sections, okay. With Marcaine, doctor induced me. It took a while. Long time, right? Because it takes a while to build it up. They pull your plug, the water comes, they get the contractions going. You're going to be in the hospital for 12, 18 hours before you start really getting into the contractions, okay? And we're talking a 9-pound baby from a 105-pound woman, all right? So anyway, contractions start, and then in the middle of the night, they get worse, right? So, they come and they offer you an epidural, and that's where they freeze you from the waist down, okay? So that's what they did for me with Marcaine, because it was going to be a long time before the contractions really started to pick up. This is costing, I suppose, the taxpayers dollars, because they don't really do that anymore for women these days in 2020. When was Amari born? In 2017, and even less because it's all cutbacks. But besides that point. All right. And then, doctor would come in, his hair would be all mixed up and he looking like an Albert Einstein with his big puffy, slippers on over his shoes, checking on me in the middle of the night to see if I'm okay as my labor is progressing. Okay. In other words, he slept at the hospital because he knew he was going to deliver a baby by me because he was my actual quote unquote baby doctor. Big difference between having a baby doctor and a doctor that's wandering around in a clinic that could be any doctor on any particular day when you show up. All right. Huge difference. So, and that's why I get angry, because I feel like my daughter didn't receive the proper health care. All right. She was blown off and through her medical records and how they tried to insinuate this and falsify that and insinuate that. It was clear that they were trying to make her sound like she crawled out of a freaking gutter somewhere out on the streets, homeless, with no prenatal care for the whole duration of her pregnancy. And therefore, that's why there was something wrong with the baby, when they damn well knew as soon as he was born, there was something wrong with him. But they tried to cover it up. And now I've got a doctor, a real doctor, hopefully an ethical doctor, that's not fucking afraid to stand up and speak truth, look for the truth, right? And if anything, it will never save Amari. It will never change Amari. It will never stop what happened to him. It's not going to bring Shimei back, but it might just prevent other mothers from having to face what my family has had to face. Okay? So I have to approach this person. I have to approach this person who wants to know why Amari is the way he is and ask them to do a full. If you're wanting to know how a child got cerebral palsy, isn't that a form of an investigation? But you don't want to call it an investigation, because if you call it an investigation, you're immediately going to put people on guard. Well, I'm not investigating. I'm not working to, that's not what, as a doctor, that's not what I'm trying to do here. Okay? Well, what are you trying to do? Well, I want to know what happened to him. I want to know why he has it. That's my line of business, right? To know these things so that, right, we can maybe prevent it from happening again to somebody else. Isn't that what happens when you do that kind of stuff? Well, if that's the case, then you're going to have to dig a little freaking deeper and look past the freaking lies that were imported subtly within this medical record. And don't forget, I've read them, people. Not that I could understand everything that I read in Amari's files and everything that I read in Shimei's files, but I read enough to see that there was some shenanigans going on. And it was the precursor to what happened to her on April 11th of 2018 when she died in this house from nefarious activities that was covered up. Okay. Is the doctor going to consider that? It might scare the pants off him and he'll back off. Or maybe he'll take a bribe to shut up so that it doesn't get exposed as to what's really going on in our hospitals and how certain individuals, including babies, are targeted at the time of their birth so that it can fill a slot within a, provincial program that's being funded in the millions of dollars so it can hook up with some global study to which I don't even know why my grandson was on that program, because it didn't accomplish anything outside of expose him to unnecessary x-rays. Now that I think about it, when it came to the hip surveillance program, because if you notice the last video that I uploaded, they dumped me like a hot freaking potato because they can't freaking operate him on him no more. That window of quote unquote opportunity is over. But why is it that I can't still remain with that hip doctor, being that I thought I was mandated, I was required, and if I didn't, I would be accused of medical negligence by not participating in that program. So yeah, I went for the hip, and they tried to, want me to do that experimental thing that, whatever this doctor was saying is now 90% of all doctors are doing, and blah, blah, with no guarantees. just like, right? Well, baby doctor, you get pregnant, you get a baby doctor. Yeah, you don't get sent to a clinic and shuffled around like a nobody so that some random stranger can sit there in a hospital or wherever and falsify your medical records so it makes it look like you're scandalous, because at the end of the day, something came out wrong with the baby and they had to blame Shimei. Everybody blaming Shimei. Remember those videos? Huh? Yeah. And so this doctor, I'm going to tell him, I have to get some ink. I'm going to type this shit out because he wants to know. Well, if you want to know what happened to Amari, then you better start digging. Yeah. Some files I can get, other files I can't. But you know what I'm going to do? And I've been meaning to do it for a long time. And now I'm definitely going to do it. I'm going to do it real freaking soon. I have to do it because I've got a trust fund here that Uncle John and I started for Shimei when she was born, and it requires 2 signatures to do anything with it. But of course, Uncle John's not here because he just threw us off into the garbage can from the Duncan's perspective, right? In terms of, what they did with Fraser Health Authority and CIBC Bank, as if we were a nobody and a nothing. So anyway, I got to go to court, provincial court, in front of a judge to get, I don't know, some kind of authority. I don't know exactly the exact term of it, where I can request medical files that are being denied to me because I don't have that quote unquote court order, right? Or deal with the trust fund and quote unquote, I don't know, bypass. I don't know if I can ever bypass. Honestly, I don't know if I can ever bypass Uncle John's signature. It requires 2 signatures to close that account that Uncle John and I opened up when Shane May was born. So even if I go in front of a judge, it's not going to make much difference. I don't think so. How can I prove that John died outside of providing an obituary? Right? Well, maybe it might come to that. Either or, there's other things like the prenatal clinic. I want to get her medical records from the prenatal clinic. And I want Shimei's medical records from that clinic with that doctor, you know who, Wyszynski, telling me to take his ass to court to get them. Because he damn well knew that there was shenanigans going on with her body when she died. Yeah. But he was a coward. He couldn't see, he was afraid of the truth. So he hid the truth. That's what he did. But this doctor that wants to know what happened to Amari, he needs access to those files if he's serious about finding out what happened to Amari. Okay. Seriously. I just don't know if he'll be able to handle the truth and the scandal around it and what it all built up to in terms of my daughter dead now, with whispers in the halls if I come to the hospital, right, with Amari because of a seizure. Yeah, whatever. So I'm kind of hopeful that this man is up. I don't know what to think. I'd like to think that he'd be open to the information as long as I provide it to him in a way that is written in point form and can be easily referenced with any medical records that I can provide to him so that he can do a thorough research. We'll call it a research. It's not even research, but a thorough, I can't think. A thorough review of the information in front of him so he could put a correlation together as to the probable cause, more than likely, unless he can exactly pinpoint the moment that Mari's brain just got deprived of oxygen for long enough where it created a severe, it's amazing he didn't die. That's how severe it was. Okay. All right. So in terms of Marcaine, all right, so I'm now in the middle of the night, and the doctor, he gave me an epidural because the contractions are starting to build more and more and more. He come in the middle of the night with his, it was just so funny. I love that doctor. I'll never forget that doctor. He was the best doctor when it came to a baby doctor. Seriously, he made me feel so happy, so comfortable, so relaxed, just whatever, right? He knew exactly what he was doing, but he kind of had the hair like an Albert Einstein. And so anyway, the epidural was starting to freeze me up here in the chest, eh? And that can get dangerous because your lungs will shut down, right? So he had to turn it off. So he turned off the epidural. And then after a few hours, while I was hardcore labor, serious, just I was right in it. But he couldn't use the epidural because it was too late now, right? So I felt everything, trust me. And they ended up I had two people on the left leg and two people on the right leg. And I'm laying, you know how they lay you on a table, right? And don't forget, Marcaine was 9 pounds. Okay, that's a big baby for a 105-pound woman. So anyway, two people on each leg. They put my legs like this, and they were all holding them down, right? And I'm like, it's burning, it burns, it burns. And then what happened was, because he was coming down the birth canal, and he had the umbilical cord around his neck, his heartbeat would drop. But then when the contraction stopped, it went back up. So as that process was going on, my doctor felt confident that he could deliver Marcaine without causing brain damage because of the fact of the way the baby was responding to the contractions throughout the whole process. So in other words, the more he came down the birth canal, obviously the heart rate dropped, right? But it came back up. So every time they go a little lower, it dropped, it come back up. Where with Shimei, it was different. And you see, that is the thing. Okay? She started labor, I don't know the exact date right now, 5 days. She went to the hospital, they sent her away. She went to the hospital, they sent her away. And then I guess the 5th day, she went back to the hospital and they kept her. Right? And then they put her in a room, finally, after 5 days, which is wrong. She should have had Where was her baby, doctor? Okay. And, I don't know. They didn't give her no tests within that 5 days going back and forth, back and forth. I'm sure they gave her something. I'd like to think they did, right? When she got there, okay, and stayed there. And it got to the point where the labor dragged out for over 12 hours or something, Tisha was saying, because Tisha was there, right? Julian was there. I think his sister was there. I couldn't be there, though, because of Julian and his sister, all right? So, but Tisha was there. So anyway, she dragged it out. I was told by Tisha that the doctor did ask her. Now, you see, this is unprofessional. The doctor did ask Shimei if Shimei wanted a, C-section. Because the pains were like going on and on and on and on and on. And that's normal. You can have labor for 3 days hardcore. Did that. First child. That's 36 hours. Okay. That's a day and a half, right? Almost 3 days, 2 days, sorry. A day and a half, 36, 37, 38 hours, easy labor, with half of that being hardcore labor, okay, before the baby comes out. And that's a natural birth with nothing. No epidurals, nothing, right? Okay. And with epidurals, because it still takes time, right? So they dragged it out. And then all of a sudden, because Shimei said, no, I don't want a C-section. I want to try and have a natural birth. Doctor said, oh, well, okay, no problem. You've only been doing this for 6 days. Everything should be fine. We'll just chance it. And then all of a sudden, after 6 days of Shimei complaining about labor to one degree or another, his heartbeat dropped. But guess what? It didn't come back up. And that's what made it an emergency. How professional, I would think, knowing what I know and how I was treated with my children when I gave birth. Okay? And nobody sure in hell falsified my medical records to suggest that I was some homeless person that crawled in off the freaking streets with no prenatal care. And that's why everything went wrong. All right. And this is where this doctor needs to acknowledge that. And I don't know if he will be able to do that, because it might open up a can of worms for him that he doesn't want to deal with, right? Or maybe he can't cope with that kind of information because, he's a professional and he's an ethical man. And God forbid if people within his profession are running around committing crimes, cutting backroom deals here, there, and everywhere else for a little bit of this and a little bit of that, because something sure in hell went wrong. Okay? And like I'm choked. So his heartbeat dropped and it never came back up. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, it was an emergency. So I guess it took them 20 minutes, a half an hour to prep the freaking emergency room. I don't know how long it took. We can say 15 minutes. I don't think she was in there in 2 minutes after his heart dropped. It probably took a little while before he went in there and was finally, taken out. And by the time he was taken out, he had already pooped inside her. So not only did his heart drop, which tells you he's not breathing properly. And if he is breathing, what the hell is he breathing in? Oh, but they have a little solution that if they poop in the, in the amniotic sac, they just prevent infection or whatever. And he came out, and you know what? He was shaking and he was twitching. I have a video of it. He was twitching. He almost twitched himself off the freaking table. So he came out that way. And then they tried to blame her for it and said it was drugs because she had, what was it? Fentanyl in her system. When it was their fentanyl. Or whatever. It was their drug. But they had to document it down. And then they took that little piece of information and they imported it 8 months later into another file to make it sound like it was a recent occurrence and that it applied to that whatever we were doing with Amari when we were going to the hospital with all those series of tests. And I caught it when I was reading her medical records. And then things got mixed up, you know how it goes, right? And I had to go back and right. But the point is there's you know, they literally write in her medical files that she received no prenatal care. And that is a flat out lie, because she was going to the prenatal clinic that the father of Amari, mother, works at. And then she referred Tisha to go to that clinic when Tisha got pregnant, because the doctors there are no more baby doctors anymore. You have to go find a clinic. And after I read Shimei's medical files and I seen what the hell was going on in them, when Tisha was going to go to that clinic that Shimei went to, that wrote that they did not freaking see her in the hospital files, that she had no prenatal clinic, no prenatal care of any kind for the whole duration of her freaking pregnancy, which is a flat out freaking lie. I told Tisha, don't you go to that clinic. There's something funky going on at that clinic. Go to New Westminster. So she had to go to a clinic in New Westminster. When women should be having assigned baby doctors. Mm-hmm. With the doctors not sending home the patients with morphine and saying, come back when it starts to hurt. Well, how the hell do you know if it's going to hurt if you're freaking stuck on morphine? Like, right? And that's another thing. Okay. And I have to write this down. I got to give as much information that I can, whether this doctor looks at it or not, it doesn't matter. But I have to give it my all, right? I need to, oh God, I didn't want to lose that thought. There was something there I need to do. Now I forgot. Because I'm so like, oh yes, and now I remember. All right, so the hospital, she goes to the hospital. I'm in pain. I got labor. Oh no, you're not fine. You need to go home. Here, take this with you if you need pain medication. Okay, she goes home. She stays home the next day. Then she goes back the next day. That's the second time, right? Oh well, I'm in pain. Blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, but it's still not enough. Okay, so here's some more morphine and go home and then come back when it's worse. That is not healthcare. That's putting mother and child at risk, especially when they're new moms and never gave birth yet, because not all women cervixes open up. Okay, and because there's so many women these days having abortions, right? That changes the I'm not saying it does, but it affects your it can cause problems, especially if you're going into the multiples. Like it's been proven that if women have too many abortions, there's a difference between abortions and a miscarriage. Okay. A miscarriage is a natural act of the body flushing out a fetus that's not viable. And it's usually done successfully without complications. Sometimes the body won't or can't flush it out, because I've had that happen to me too before, where the fetus ends up just staying lodged wherever it is. And because it's not viable and it's dead, basically, and it's not growing, it starts to cause an infection and yada, yada, yada. So then you go to a hospital and you have a DNC where it takes all whatever needs to come out so that your body can heal. And as fast as you get that done, you can get pregnant the following month and have a healthy baby. Because I know that from experience, okay? So just keep in mind, because oftentimes people will call miscarriages abortions. No, they're not. They're miscarriages. And a D&C is usually done for a particular reason, like what I just explained, where an abortion is a completely different procedure that does have complications sometimes for women. And with multiple abortions, you're increasing those complications when it comes to risk factors, right? Just to where with Shimei, because she had already had previous abortions, I'm not sure exactly how many, but it was more than one, right? That could have played a role in why her cervix wasn't opening up in a timely manner, considering that on day 5 going into day 6, she still hadn't dilated enough. That's a long time to be experiencing labor pains, okay? To the point where finally the baby just, because again, if the baby is in the birth canal, okay, again, okay. So again, if the baby is in the birth canal and you've already got those contractions going, if the umbilical cord is around the neck, and depending on how strong those contractions are, the baby's heartbeat will drop, right? Okay. And where it's not an emergency is when the baby's heartbeat comes back up when the contraction ends. And the contractions could be like this, because I know it took me 1 hour to push out Marcaine, but as fast as they went down, they went back up, because when you're in labor, right, your stomach is going like this. Okay. You know what I'm saying? It's right. And I had to, I mean, like this, where I had to push him out. So either or, his heartbeat came up. So that's what saved him. Where Amari's went down, it never came back up. And maybe it took them too long to prep the emergency room. How long did he go without adequate oxygen, with his heartbeat dropping and not going back up? Because if it drops, then that tells you he's something's wrong, right? There's not enough oxygen. A heartbeat goes with your, right? If you run, what happens? Your heart starts to go like this, and you're right. You know what I'm saying? So, don't say that a heartbeat that drops and it doesn't go back up isn't a problem, because it is. And this is where doctors, they kind of gauge this stuff, as they monitor their patients. Even if it means over a day and a half to 2 days before delivery, depending on the type of delivery, to which Shimei didn't get that privilege, because I would think cutbacks to the healthcare system. And if this doctor doesn't like what he sees when these children come in with severe brain damage, their lives completely altered for the rest of their lives, with, limited life, right? Like Amari, you'll be lucky if he lives till he's 45 years old. That's their average lifespan for children like Amari. And I'm like, holy crumb. And then, but if you look after them really, really good, they can live until their 70s. Well, that sounds a little more reasonable, because if the world could be as happy as Amari is, the world would be a better place. Huh? That's where I'm lucky. That's where I'm blessed. Little Amari, if he wants to get somewhere, he's going to find a way to do it, because he's just that little Houdini baby that thinks more than you think he thinks. And he's always happy, no matter what. Okay. So I'm blessed, where other children are almost like they're in a vegetated state, right? They lay, they're not mobile, they're on feeding tubes, they have trachs, right? They're right. You're not sure if they're connecting, but for the caregivers that work with those children, they know that there's someone in there, and they're right. There's that little happy spark. Where Amari, in some ways, Tisha comes and says he doesn't even look like he has cerebral palsy because he's so cute, which is true. But with the weight, I don't like that. So whether that's related to the brain yet or not, hard to say, because the right side of his body, because of the damage of the brain, never put on muscles. But now it seems to have kind of go the whole way. But either or, this is what this doctor said. The next time Amari has a seizure, okay, There's a new medication that he's going to give me. Use it. Go to the hospital, right, to see, make sure he has no allergic reactions and all that kind of stuff with it, right? And then after that, he increased his medication that we have right now a little bit, a half a mil, because he wants to completely stop Amari's seizures. I don't know if that's possible, but he seems to think so. So, because if that was the case, anyone with seizures would not have seizures anymore, and people continue to have seizures even when they're on medications. So I take that, I take that with him genuinely wanting to stop them, but there is a possibility, because you just never know, right? And then after that, one time of going to the hospital with that medication, and if everything's good and he's got no allergic reactions to it, next time we're at home, if he has a seizure, because Andre and I and everybody, right, basically have been through enough of them over the course of, since he started them, which has been about 4 years, because he started them late, right? And he normally had them once a year. He doesn't understand why they went back to back this time around, but he increased, okay? And so if he has them again after the next time he has them, as long as he's not turning blue and he's breathing, we don't have to go to the hospital, because Andre and I have done it so many times. Because when they have seizures, they do, they get sleepy. So sometimes they want to sleep. Other times he's coming out of it. I can tell he's alert. Right? It takes a while sometimes for it to work itself out, right? Sometimes they sleep, sometimes they don't. He said as long as he doesn't turn blue and he's breathing, then we don't have to go to the hospital. But my heart's going like this, because I'm so traumatized by the whole experience. Serious. But still to this day, especially that last one, when I thought he was choking, I was so scared. I went out into the freaking road, wanted to jump into that ambulance. I ran to the road with Amari thinking he was choking. Wasn't too sure if it was a seizure as it was quote unquote choking. And I wanted to be right there as soon as that ambulance drove up and said, "Here, he's choking." All right. Oh my God. So that's what I mean. Like, even though you've done it like several times over a course of years, you just don't know how you're going to react to it, because it can be frightening. It can really be frightening. But at least it gave us some wiggle room, because, it's like I told this to Tisha. Amari has a seizure. If I give him, I'll give you an example. If I give him one of these in his cheek at the direction of the doctor to hopefully stop the seizure, depending on, but you have to give this to them within the first 2 minutes or first 5 minutes or something. And if you miss it, then you kind of miss that window of opportunity. Either or. We gave Amari this one time when he had a seizure. We thought we pretty much caught it on time. Ambulance comes. They give him one. He goes to the hospital. They give him one. So now they gave him 3. That puts him out for 18 hours. All day, all night. Yep. I'm not on top, not including anything else that they do when I give them medication. And then they call in all the nurses, to which many of them are student nurses. And then they're practicing on Amari how to run a, suction tube down the throat to clear the airway, with everybody standing around watching, because it becomes a realistic practicum. I witnessed one nurse one time when that happened, what I'm just talking about, putting a tube down his throat and he started puking up even more. And then she admitted that she made a mistake because she used the wrong size tube. Well, all the other student nurses and whoever were standing around watching to learn. And then they moved him to a different room and had me go down the hall. And then some social worker came and sat beside me and said, well, I think they're going to do a tracheotomy. I said, what? Why? Oh, well, he's not breathing very well. Yeah, right. They never did it, thank God, because he didn't need it. And when he did get home, his throat was all scratchy for quite a few days because of that. Okay. So if I can avoid the hospital, not only to save taxpayers money and the stress of just the whole experience, because you never know what you're going to get when you get there. Some days we're out of there within 3 hours. Other days we're there for 2 days. Like the last time, not the one in June. They did a whole freaking series on him. They had him upstairs. They moved him from emergency and then they moved him upstairs. That's when I was in there grinding up his food in that room with that video. And they did this, all those series of blood tests and the EGG and just whatever, right? Scrutinizing me. Yeah, you know that, eh? Yeah. Had everybody come talk to me. That can get stressful too. Tisha doesn't like to go because, they're always drilling her. What happened? What happened? Like if I don't go, right? Normally I go, but they don't always like me in the ambulance. And that's another thing. It's not like I can just go drive there and follow behind the ambulance. It's either I go in the ambulance or I stay home and I wait for a taxi, to which Tisha would go. And then she gets mad at me because I'm not in the freaking ambulance. But they don't always want you there. They just want to go, right? So anyway, I would think the good news is that, Amari doesn't have to go to the hospital each and every time he has a seizure, providing that he's not going blue in the face and he's breathing. So in other words, he could be sleeping, right? As long as he's not completely convulsing. And if that doesn't stop, then for sure, because, once they start doing that, and that's why we can't put Amari in the bedroom by himself or have him by himself for any length of time, because once that starts, you don't know how long it's going to happen if they're by themselves. And right. And when they're convulsing like that and it's not stopping, that's what can cause permanent brain damage. At this point, nobody thinks that Amari's developed any brain damage, quote unquote, from the seizures, but there is always that possibility, especially if you can't control them, right? Or stop them completely. The goal of this doctor that we're now dealing with wants to stop them completely, but he also wants to take it one step further. And as a professional that is disturbed by these types of brain injuries and the result and the ramifications around them and the treatment and, blah, 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 I could understand why he'd want to know how it happened so it could perhaps be prevented for another child. As well as maybe bring some closure with what I gotta say. 5 days in labor, being sent away 2 times from the hospital with morphine to mask pain, with your first birth after having previous abortions, is a high-risk patient for complications, not to mention for the baby. And that's exactly how I write it down when I present the information that I have for this doctor to do the review to see if he can determine a guesstimated pinpoint of What happened to Amari? I sent that information that I have right now in regards to Shamay's medical files, Amari's medical files. She wasn't interested in Shamay's files, this lawyer, because I want, right? I wanted, and she offered to look at them. And because she had looked at files before, she felt confident that she could see if it was direct negligence, direct, keyword, direct negligence from a hospital's perspective with their staff compared to maybe something else that happened inadvertently, whether it was quote unquote drug use, as they like to insinuate what it was when, put on guard, or whether it was just something that happened through the gestational period for whatever reason that, because after she looked over the medical files of Amari, I'm not sure about Shamay, but anyway, she said there was one piece of paper missing. So she wasn't 100% sure based on that one piece of paper being missing. Talk about looking for that clue, right? But if she had to put her professional opinion on it as to what happened to Amari at what time of this gestation, I think she said before 34 weeks. Before 34 weeks. To which, here's another thing, and I need to write this down so I don't forget these things. Another thing is, she had a 3D ultrasound. Oh, yeah. And it is recommended that you don't have them no more than 30 minutes. And I'm wondering if she had them more than 30 minutes. Not to mention just the procedure itself, if maybe it didn't cause some kind of something going on with Amari in the in vitro that could have provoked that, because there are no, quote unquote, long-term studies as to side effects to 3D ultrasounds, because they're not technically connected to the healthcare system. They're not regulated. They're not regulated like they are as if you were to go to a hospital. That's what makes it precarious. I mean, it could be something from that, for all we know. I'm going to write this down, because if he wants to know what happened to Amari, he needs to factor in these issues. Yeah. And if we need to get medical files. And this is where I need to go to the provincial court, because I'm not interested in half-baked theories. I'm not interested in half attempts to find half the truth just because you don't want to face the other half. I want to know the truth for Amari's sake and everybody else involved in his life, dead or alive. Okay? 3D ultrasound. So we need to talk about that. I'm going to write to this doctor, and I'm going to gather up what pieces of information I have when it comes to medical files. As a matter of fact, I don't even need to photocopy. It's already in the box. I think I did. I opened up the box when the lawyer sent me back the information. She wrote me a letter. It's all there in a box. So that box, Tisha can drop it off, and he can start looking. And that one piece of paper that's missing, if there's anything that he thinks he needs, just tell me, and I'll go to the hospital and I will request those types of papers. They should be on file, or I'll just request the files, medical files, all over again. And if they want to freaking hide it, because if they want to hide it, by that time, hopefully I'll be at court getting permission from a judge to do the affairs of my daughters, Sierra and Sierra and Shamay, right? To get medical files if and when I need them for whatever reason I want them for, because that's my business, right? I mean, no point in giving him medical files if there's one piece of paper missing. So he needs to confirm what's missing so I can go get it for him. so that he can analyze it some more. But before he comes to a conclusion, he needs to factor in, well, she also had a 3D ultrasound on such and such a date, right? Maybe that affected the, before 34 weeks. I'm pretty sure she had the ultrasound before 34 weeks. So for all we know, maybe it was the ultrasound that shocked him, through the whatever, because, maybe it was, instead of 30 minutes, maybe it was 40 minutes. And that 10 minutes extra did something where he went into, who knows? Or what about, here's another thing. I'll write this down. Puking. This is another thing. Okay. Puking. Okay. So she goes to the hospital. She says she's in labor. They send her away with morphine, telling her she's not ready to give birth, go home. Then she goes back on the third day, says it's getting worse. They say, oh, well, you're not ready. Here's some more morphine. Go back home. She's at home now the next day. When those days were here, like when she was here within that that window of time that I just spoke of, I went downstairs and I walked past the bathroom and I heard her puking her freaking guts out into the toilet. Now, if you got a baby sitting up in your birth canal trying to get out, but it can't because your cervix isn't open because there's something maybe physiologically wrong with you, whether through by natural being, because not every woman's cervix open up, where maybe through your procedures that you had in the past, there could have been something there that, who knows? If my uterus can tilt from having too much oxytocin given to me in the birthing process, where it became a violent experience and it damaged my body, then don't tell me that, those abortions, multiples especially, wouldn't affect the body in a negative kind of way. Okay? Anytime your vagina is being open, well, it's not even your vagina, it's your cervix. Anytime your cervix, your hip, right? It's all to do with your hips and everything. They literally, when I went into labor with Shemay, I was sewing for the dancers. So I was going up and down the old dell at the Bird with carpet bags full of costumes, big belly, right? Up these old ancient stairs to go see the girls. I came home after doing that, and I was like 1 week before my due date. And I came out of wherever I was. I said, John, I think I'm starting labor here. And so anyway, I'm standing in the living room, or I'm standing in the kitchen. And this is how fast your cervix can open up. Okay, I'll tell you right now. And I'm standing there and I'm like, oh, right? And then all of a sudden, the pains were starting, right? And I'm like, I don't know, something's going on here, John. And so, have a coffee, Judy. So we're in the kitchen and I'm standing by the stove. And then all of a sudden, just like that, and Shemay was my fourth child, okay? I heard it, people. I heard it. I felt it. Whoosh. The amniotic fluid flushed out. The point is, it opened up. So she may come down the birth canal. That birth was like, from that moment on, that was like at midnight. I don't know. Shemay was born like 2, 3 in the morning. That was the fastest birth I ever had in my whole life. And it was fun. We're cracking jokes the whole time. And when she came out, oh, wait a minute, they did falsify my records. We got to the hospital, we were cracking jokes and da-da-da-da. I always think that Mr. Gill, my landlord, was the taxi driver that picked Uncle John and I up when we went to the hospital with Shemay. And he was like, ooh, Punjabi, right? With his turban. Ooh, don't have baby in car. Don't have baby in car. And we're laughing and joking and get to the hospital. John cracking jokes. I'm cracking jokes. The nurse was cracking jokes. We get up into the room. Everybody's still cracking jokes. But for whatever strange reason, the nurse came to me and she says, well, how about you have an epidural, it'll help to calm you down and, keep everything quiet and whatever. And I said, and she said, no, it's okay. It's okay. And so I said, yes. She approached me and I said, yes. And within not even a half an hour, whatever the hell it was, Shemay was born. right? And then as soon as Shimei was born, I looked at Shimei. I said, oh my God, she looks like me. And they gave Shimei to Uncle John. And he was as proud as a button because that's the first time he ever held a newborn. Yeah. Okay. So with that, what I'm trying to say is giving birth 3 times prior to giving birth to Shimei prepped my body to give to do what it did. To do what it just went. I heard it. I felt it. Shimei's wasn't moving. Why? Some women, they can't. It's just, it is what it is. That's why they created C-sections. Other women, it's okay, right? But it requires an experienced doctor who knows what they're doing to deliver the baby safely. And I don't feel that that's what happened to Shimei. I don't. Especially when they falsified her medical records. In my record, I read it. I got to that point with Shimei, and it said that I was demanding. I demanded that epidural, which is a lie. I did not. I was laying there. I was having fun. I was laughing. John and I were cracking jokes. But, it's money for them. So she just put it down like I demanded it. So therefore, that's how they justified billing the government for it, because it was something I demanded, which was not true. And that was about the only thing in my medical file that I can recall that was misleading. Where in Shimei's medical files, there's straight up falsified information there to make it misleading, so that no blame is pointed at anybody except Shimei, which I think is unprofessional and just shows how shoddy our healthcare system is when it comes to women, I suppose, below that income level, right? That caste system, who are the throwaways in society and who could be used as a commodity, whether right then and there or at a later date, because ain't nobody going to give a rat's ass, never mind fight for their rights, right? And this is where I'm different. I'm still fighting for Shimei's rights and justice. And I'm still like, I want to know what's going on, what happened with Amari. I don't want to be, would I accept that it happened before 34 weeks? Well, if that's the case, then explain to me how and why. And don't just say because of drug use. There's millions of women out there doing cocaine within their first trimester, second trimester, third trimester. They do their cocaine right up until the very bitter end, where their babies come out with cleft lips, because I've seen babies like that, okay, where the mothers did crack cocaine and cocaine. And throughout their whole pregnancies, and those babies, they had everything working. It's just they had a cleft lip, right? That made it difficult for the baby to eat. A lot of physical problems, right? Sierra said meth, if women are using meth for the duration long term, right? Not so much the first trimester, because you have to remember Sierra was a meth addict. So when she was pregnant, I'm pretty sure she was in the first trimester with Andre. She was on meth, and that's how they bring in the heroin, and then the meth went to She was already okay. She started as a meth addict, then she went to a heroin addict. I tried to get her on methadone before she got pregnant. Anyway, when she got pregnant, there was people out there trying to, procure her into prostitution and yada yada. So they were using drugs as a tool to control her. So it was a combination between meth and heroin, because heroin was starting to be introduced into the community, right? And once I got her to not be afraid to have Andre and to have him and not have an abortion and not to worry, because everybody was telling her to abort him because of her drug use prior to, right, making the decision to keep him. And I'm the one that convinced her not to abort him. I told her, don't you worry, you'll be fine, right? You're under 3, okay, you're right. It's the alcohol that's really bad. You got to watch the alcohol because that changes the physiological part, right? So anyway, she chose to decide to finally keep him, and she went on methadone. And then she stayed on methadone for the other 6 months of her pregnancy. So she was on methadone for the second and third trimester. And the only thing that happened to him, Andre, when he was born, he couldn't regulate his temperature because of the methadone, because they had to wean him off the methadone because he was addicted to the methadone as much as his mother, right? And after a couple of weeks, his temperature, he could regulate his body temperature on his own, but he always had a little stuffy nose. Until this day, he's still that way. Outside of that, I tell Andre almost every day, Andre, God knew what he was doing when he made you. Don't you let anybody ever tell you that you're not important, because that little guy that hears you grinding up his food and gets so happy and so excited that you're coming to be and help and feed him and whatever, God knew what he was doing when he made you. And Andre's going to be a tall, strong man. And he will have Amari's back, with or without me, providing somebody doesn't want to come in and take Amari away from him. If there'd be no Andre today, I don't know. But if you notice, Andre was made first. And I had to plead for Sierra to keep him and not worry about drugs. And she kept him. And everybody depends on Andre to help with Amari, even though they want to deny it. My son, oh, yeah, well, you're not doing what Andre does, so shut the F up. Right? Anybody. Doesn't matter. When it comes down to the rubber meets the road, Andre will be there helping Amari because he does it every day. Did we ask to have Amari born the way he did? No, we didn't. I wouldn't wish this on anybody. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't wish it on a child, and I don't care if you're my worst enemy. I still wouldn't wish it on you because I wouldn't want it for the child. So I'm hoping this doctor really wants to find the truth, because if there's negligence from a healthcare perspective when it comes to not providing a baby doctor in a timely manner, where, maybe she should have been induced, or at least once the contractions started, she should have been monitored, and maybe, right? You know what I'm saying? And definitely not go to the hospital after 5 days of being turned away with freaking morphine. Oh yeah, the puking part. So yeah. They turned her away downstairs. I heard her puking. If Amari is in the middle of the birth canal and can't get out because her cervix isn't opening up because of whatever reason, and the cord is around his neck, what's happening to that umbilical cord? It's tightening around his neck each and every time she heaved. So maybe that's where the cerebral palsy came from, being that they want to place it before the time of birth, right? Except for the lawyer said 34 weeks. Well, if you want to take it to that point, then I'd go looking at the 3D ultrasound, and I'd see how safe those things really are. Because if they're creating cerebral palsy in children, deceiving the public as they're making vulnerable parents pay for it, then they need to be shut down, and the government needs to regulate it more than it already is, because that's a private service. She may pay for that. As it's being written in her medical files by somebody that's clearly taken some kind of bribe or something along the way. Okay, that she didn't receive prenatal care. Yeah, okay, sure. She's just going to run off and go get a 3D ultrasound all by herself because she's strung out on the streets, homeless, scratching her way here and scratching her way there, crawled her way into the hospital right at the last minute of giving birth because she didn't take the time to go get prenatal care from anywhere except a 3D ultrasound. Give it a break. Give it a break. And that's why I didn't want Tisha going back to that funky freaking prenatal clinic sitting up in here in Surrey, British Columbia, Canada, considering who works there. Because for all we know, some of the falsified records could be written in by somebody that's implanted into a bigger, larger system that targets vulnerable people for profit. Whether they're babies born at the time of their birth or whether they're vulnerable women trying to break away from violent relationships and then end up dead because of it. Talk about old wounds being opened up, eh? Mm-hmm. So I got my work cut out for me. I have to write a letter so that the doctor can think outside of the box. Does puking while being in labor to one degree or another with the umbilical cord around a baby's neck that's already somewhere he must have dropped. He just couldn't get into the birth canal. That was the problem. Yeah. But does puking with an umbilical cord around a baby's neck as you're in labor and you're heaving violently because of the puking, because of the pain? She was in pain. She said she didn't take the morphine because she was trying to do the right thing for her baby. Just like she didn't want the C-section. She was hoping that she could have a natural birth. And then they let it drag out so long until finally his heart dropped and it just didn't come back up. And then they blamed her for it, saying, well, we asked you if you wanted the C-section, so don't blame us. That's not professional. There's nothing professional about that. I know. I had 5 kids. Live births without C-sections. And they were all different, but they were all handled much more better than what they did with Shemaine. Yeah. And it wasn't like I could go to the hospital with her and start bossing people around and say, well, yeah, because Julian was always lurking. And then on the day she went for, there at the hospital, what you going to do? You wait. But he came out twitching. He was twitching as they were cleaning him. He was doing this. That's a seizure. For the first month, he looked so miserable because of the lines in his head from the pain in his brain. I doubt he was like that for 6 weeks in vitro because he got injured before 34 weeks. They would have noticed that, you would think. No, those were recent. He always looked like he was in pain with the deep brow. Because of that brain damage. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. All I can do is my part. Right? Just do my part and give the doctor as much information as I can, because it might end up helping other families to receive better health care, to prevent what happened to Amari. I stand my ground, people. So I should be grateful. I am very grateful that I actually have a doctor that wants to know the truth. I just don't necessarily trust the process. And even if I do trust the process, because by nature I'm a trusting person, I'm wondering what kind of backlash I'm going to get for seeking that truth in terms of who's going to get hurt next. Because that's usually how it works. Right? If I work on Uncle John's lawsuit back in the day, who would show up? City of Surrey. Put my ass outside working for a year and then come back not even 8 months later and put me back outside. And for what? For nothing. Right? But it accomplished the goal. It prevented me from working on fighting the lawsuit with Uncle John. Right? I had to choose sink or swim. Well, I had to survive. I had to be in the yard. That was the swimming part. Otherwise, I would have sunk. And that's the game. As soon as you get close to, as soon as you start getting closer and closer to the truth, or you get closer and closer to accomplishing something that can make a difference, right, in terms of justice or whatever. And somebody always come in and trying to pull out from underneath the feet, push you down. I thought maybe I should stay silent on it, move silently, Don't tell anybody that there's a doctor out there that wants to know what happened, because you're putting everybody in jeopardy by talking about it. Now, that's talk about paranoia. Now, that's some serious paranoia. But when you look back in my life and all the bad things that's happened to my family over a period of years and why it happened that way and yada, yada, well, you'd be paranoid too, for sure. For sure. But Amari and everybody else, we have a right to know. We do. We do. And if Amari's story can help get better health care for people, well, that would be good, but that's a long, drawn-out process. You're talking legislation, provincial budgets, debates in the Parliament building. That's a lot of steps to go through before you can actually get a quote-unquote baby doctor assigned to you versus having to go to a clinic and then just, I don't know. Okay, so that's it. I'm done. Thank you for listening. For the ones that care, that is. Seriously. Yeah. How do you end this thing? End stream.